Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this Hebrew word study, our weekly study as we're going through the book of First Samuel and are in chapter 17. And we finished up with verse 7 last week and picking up with verse 8. And we're going to study verses 8 through 11. And this is somewhat of a transitional set of verses here. And just want to point out a couple of interesting things that I hope you enjoy. So looking at the screen right now, you see that we're displaying Bible Hub, and we start at verse 8, and it's the Hebrew goes, Vayamod Vayikra El Ma'al Rokat. Rakot. And so what's interesting here is this word Vayamod is just the word for stand, nothing out of the ordinary about it. But the word Vaikra for means to call out. And I was just kind of surprised that every translation I look at uses the word cried out. Now, Vaikra is just to call. Obviously, this was a battle situation here where Goliath is on one side with the armies of the Philistines, and the Israelites are on the other side, commandeered by Saul. And so obviously there's no amplification. Giant being a big guy, his voice would carry. Um, okay that they use cried out, but there's nothing in here that emphasizes that this was anything special other than just a loud voice. In fact, the verb usage here is in a cal form, which does not have any intensity to it. And so that's just little interesting tidbits here, just trying to get a mental impression as to what this battle array was like. Obviously, there was always noises, always yelling, always chanting of trying to rally the troops. Think of a football team and trying to, keep the momentum going and try to keep the troops engaged and aligned. And, this is a very tense moment here. The Philistines are on one side. They have a giant standing in the middle. Israelites are on the other side, and their leadership is failing them. And so, it is an intense situation, but the giant, I think, feels pretty confident that there's no intensity in his voice. He's just using his normal voice, as he has done many, many times, to go into battle. And so the word for armies here, ma'achot, is a little bit different. It means the front line, the first battle lines that are drawn, not necessarily an army as we think of it, but if you can picture how battles were fought back then, where they were in a flat plain and the armies were lined up, maybe trenched in or hidden behind, some kind of barriers on one side. So, but there's a definite line. There are your strong battle-proven warriors in the front, and then the reinforcements and the support in the back. So this is just talking about the lines that are drawn by these armies, by these groups of people. And so he called out to the battle lines of Israel, and Vayomer is the common word for saying normal speech. Vayomer lahem lama se teseu. And so he's just calling out to them and saying, why have you come up? Why are you all lined up? It's a taunt. It's a challenge, as we know that this whole thing is working out. But the words of this are just kind of interesting that he uses. And so you're lining up to do battle. And then he says, milchama, this is this standard word for battle. You'll see the word lechem inside of this, and the mem preposition sort of assimilates, but it's translated as battle. And the reason the word lechem or bread is in there is because traditionally battles had been fought for food, and at the time of starvation, they would go and fight a battle in order to keep surviving. And so that's how interesting that became part of the word for battle or war. And then he says hello, which is just the word for not. You'll see that the word M is in parentheses. It's not, there's no verb in there, and so we have to add it in English for it to make sense. But then he uses the word anochi, which you'll see in the Hebrew scriptures. There are two words for the personal pronoun translated I, and that is ani, which is very common, and then anochi. Um, I have read that the anochi is actually relates back more to an Egyptian influence in the word. And so it's kind of interesting to watch where this word comes into play. You'll find it in the book of Genesis, used quite often through there, but it's felt to have Egyptian influence in the word, which would have made sense with Moses writing and using words that he would have been familiar with, being of an Egyptian background. And it's interesting here that we see this Philistine using the word Anoki rather than Ani. And so he calls himself a Philistine, Ve'atem, and you are servants of Adim. This is the standard word that can be translated either servant or slave. Again, it depends upon the context here. We see that this is a very tense battle, and the servants that they're about that they could become would be more in the slave category. And so this is again very tense. They don't know what's going on, and then come to this neat word here. Beru. It's the beit resh with a vav with a shurik in it, giving it the oo sound, and it's saying choose a man for yourself. And all the translations I see obviously use the word choose, and we understand that that's ultimately what Goliath wants them to do. But this word beru is kind of interesting. I'm going to open it up and unpack it for you as we take a look. And I was so surprised that when I opened this up and saw its root word and its root definition, I didn't see choose. I saw to eat. And again, there is a lot of meaning behind this. It's only used, looks like 7 times in the whole Hebrew Bible. 6 of those times relates to eating and food, and 1 relates to choose. So this started me on just a fun little treasure hunt here to find out, why is this word defined as or translated as to choose when its root word is to eat. And I also noticed that the beit and narration here, and of course using the um, comets for the vowels underneath, bara is a word very familiar as we study the book of Genesis, and it is the use to create. In the beginning, Bereshit bara, in the beginning, God created, and it's a word assigned only to God for creating. And so this just piqued my interest. I had to do a little bit of looking just to see where we're going with this. So first place I went was to Jastrows, which is part of the Targumim. And I want to see if we're still sharing here. Yes, we are. Part of the Targumim. And it shows the Aramaic that is going on from giving us a history. And so I go to look up this word and I can't find it. So you'll see on the right side of the screen here, you'll see the beit resh, which with the hay, and it says that it's really a feminine form of the beit and the resh with a comets underneath of bar. And of course, the word bar has many different meanings, son of, just a number of different meanings here. So this is just piquing my interest. And it says that the hey can be replaced with the yud. And we understand that in Aramaic and in Hebrew that there are certain letters that are called vowel letters. And one of them is the hey, which is sometimes substituted as a vowel, but yet here they're saying that they can substitute the vowel letter of the yud for the hey. So I just found that all kind of interesting. So my second choice was to go to the Gesenius lexicon, and there I find a little bit more of the traditional reading, and gives me an understanding of why they use the word choose, because this word bara here comes from the uh, a base word meaning to cut, as in cutting a covenant, but cutting food, to cut things apart. And the selecting, as you're cutting food apart, you are selecting a piece to put into your mouth. And so that was just a kind of an interesting little roundabout way to find out why this word bara is translated as choose. Also, you'll find later on that there might be a little bit of a word play here, that this word to eat is also tied into later on when Goliath's challenge is discussed, and he's saying, that I'm going to feed you to the birds of the air. So maybe in the midst of this challenge, he's calling them food. He's saying, I'm calling you out, and you're nothing. You're going to be bird food. You're going to be worm food if and so maybe there's a little bit of a meaning here of derogatory insult, as they're being challenged here by the giant. And so verse 9 again reiterates, that this is why have a big battle. Let's do a one-man standoff here. And do you have a champion who can fight against you? What's interesting here is what's not being said. Why isn't Saul saying anything? Why isn't he seeking the Lord for intervention? Um, because this is a strong challenge, and obviously this could be the end of the Israelites, and the people are scared. It says that they are completely, just decimated by this. Um, they don't know what to do. And what's interesting here is we get to verse 10, we see this word herafiti, and that is used in a word to defy, and it's really a reproach. So it's even a deeper insult. And you look at the intensity of this word, herafti, it would be really the correct pronunciation, herafti, and that is in a PL form. So it's very intensive. It's got a lot of meaning behind it. All the meaning that you can put in a Hebrew word is put here into this word for reproaching, and a strong challenge by the Philistine as we understand this. And of course, the Israelites said they were completely dismayed. They were Vayiru me'od, greatly afraid, in great fear. And so this is setting up for, again, it has a punctuation mark at the end of this verse here, meaning that this was said, this had great impact upon them, and there's a break in the action. And then this is setting up the stage for David to come. And then we're going to find, as we go into the story, the next story, that there are almost 20 verses of commentary between this verse 11 and before David actually comes in and action starts happening in the battle. And so we're going to investigate some of that. But I thought you'd like to see some of this preface to this battle, some of the verbiage that was used, especially the one of the cutting or selecting and the cutting of food. And I thought that was very, very interesting. So I pray that you are blessed by this and encouraged, and maybe a little bit prompted to study deeper into God's word and use some of these wonderful tools that he's given to us. So I pray that you have a wonderful rest of your day and rest of your week. God bless you, and see you again.